FICMRepair.com. We're all in this together. Hey, Ed here at FICM Repair to talk about the larger conversation about you need head gaskets, or you're concerned that you need head gaskets, or you're thinking about putting head gaskets in your Powerstroke 6-liter. So I guess let's start with, do you really have a blown set of heads? You know, if you do, if your head gaskets are really shot, well, obviously you have no choice, right? You have to do something. If you sell the truck, you're gonna get nothing for it, right? Not in the grand scheme of things. If you fix it, well then okay, now how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? And make no mistake, it's a rabbit hole. It absolutely is a rabbit hole. And there's no right answer to this rabbit hole. Anyone who suggests that there is a right answer, they're just trying to sell you something. So don't listen to those people. There's really just no right answer. As far as, do you have to, put head gaskets in your Powerstroke? Are you guaranteed that your head gaskets are going to blow if you don't? No, absolutely not. We've got customers with 3, 4, 5, 6, 700,000 miles on their original non-studded truck, and they're doing fine. They're running the original head bolts, the original torque to yield head bolts, and they aren't having a problem at all. And so it begs the question of, why did my head gaskets blow? Well, maybe you were driving like a 17-year-old. Maybe your truck was made on a Friday at quitting time. Maybe someone put a tune on it and cranked the living tar out of it. Push a 120 horsepower street tune. I mean, that'll do it. Those things will cause these problems. There's no question. There are a litany of ways to blow head gaskets. Drive like a 17-year-old. I mean, no offense to the 17-year-olds out there. If you drive it really crazy, I mean, probably you're gonna blow some head gaskets. And this is made worse when you put bigger injectors in, you put bigger turbos in, that kind of thing. One of the nice things about FICM tuning, by the way, is that we put a FICM tune on, and you can either send us your FICM and we can tune it, or we can send you out a FICM tuner on loan. Is that there's no increased risk or propensity of cylinder head gasket failure, because there's no real, to speak of, increase in cylinder head pressures. So that's kind of handy. So you can get a tune on the FICM and not really have to worry about whether or not you need to do anything more in head gasket land. So that's pretty nice. Now, you still have, the problem with that is you're still not getting transmission tuning. So probably want ECM-based tuning, engine control module-based tuning, which would do transmission tuning, which would help with all that too. And you don't necessarily have to get ECM tuning to include adding power. You can just add transmission tuning and get that benefit and put a FICM tune on, and you can avoid the whole conversation if that's what you wanted to do. Now, if you need head gaskets, though, your head gaskets are blown, or you just decided, no, I want to run the power. I've heard from too many people that the truth is that the more power you're pushing, the better fuel economy you're getting. Just the way that it is, right? In diesel, at least, right? Not in gas. No, not in gas. But absolutely in diesel. The more power you're pushing, the better fuel economy you're getting. So this is a commercial for going ahead and putting bigger injectors in, a bigger turbo, port of this, that, and the other, and you'll be able to push the extra power. So if you put some serious miles on your 6-liter, then yeah, there's a return on your investment there. The fuel economy alone, I mean, it'd be huge. I mean, we've got a customer, they're auto transporters for a living. They put 220,000 miles a year on their rig. It's like, holy crap. Yes, well, what do you suggest? Everything, right? Anything you can do to squeeze out an extra mile to the gallon would be huge for you. But at any rate, the issue with head gaskets is, it's a lot of effort to get down up in there. And while you're in there, what else do you want to do? That's where people get caught up. That's where people start getting in trouble, I guess. And they start finding out that they're spending just copious quantities of money. And is it worth it? Are they going to see their money back? I really, who knows, right? So can you do head gaskets in the cab of the truck? Well, without lifting the cab? Yes, of course you can. Will you need a trip to the chiropractor when you're done? Probably, right? Do we sell and rent a lifting bracket that makes it so that is a lifting plate that makes it so that you can pull your motor out without lifting the cab? Well, yes, you don't need to pull the hood off, and it's pretty slick. You can front clip and stay there, all of it. So that's pretty fun. So if you wanted to do that, you could. It's really not that hard. Just a cherry picker and some time, and you're off to the races. So now the conversation is, hey, what should I do while I'm in there? Well, I don't know. What should you do while you're in there? There's a lot of considerations. Minimally, think about the heads. Metallurgy is real. And so hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold cycles, that steel is not as happy as it was when it was new. And so do you want to send your heads off to get them resurfaced and to get them checked for cracks? Or do you just want to replace them? Certainly there are, and there's another video that we did, so if you haven't seen it, please go ahead and watch it about, hey, how not to do head gaskets twice. It talks about preparation of the short block. And because people forget about that step, they use a roll lock disc or something. Oh my gosh, please don't do that. But the head itself, there is logic in getting new castings. So if you get new castings, it's not that much money in the grand scheme of things, $2,200, $2,300. And now you have brand new steel, O-ringed heads. You can get them ported if you want to. You can get higher rate springs if you want to run higher RPMs. You can get them, ported, springs, O-ringed, all the things. You can even get them out of aluminum if you want to, just to have a little zippier response. So there's a lot of, and Duramax guys have been using aluminum heads forever, so it's like, okay, so these are all considerations. And then comes the consideration of, okay, what head studs do I use? Well, ARP, they have pretty much cornered the market in head studs. Good job out of them. They've got two different versions, the conventional ones and the custom aged ones that are Be Still My Heart money. But they certainly they have more holding power than the other ones do. So if you're going to be pushing, well in advance, 650 horsepower or more, 700 horsepower or more, well then yeah, probably it makes sense to get the custom made studs. But if you're not going to do that, then you can certainly get by with just the conventional ARP studs. But then there's ARP also makes inner row bolts, so that's another thing. I'd be remiss if I didn't say, by the way, we sell everything. We carry just everything purchasable for your driveline, really, in the grand scheme of things. I can't think of an exception. So whatever you need, we got you. We rep for so many different companies, and so whatever you need, if you got a fave, supplier or whatever, so fave manufacturer, we probably rep for them. But the goal is never to sell you anything. The goal is to tell you stuff, not sell you stuff. So number one is, hey, do you want to put head studs in and not torque to yield bolts? Well, yeah, please don't, just please don't put torque to yield bolts back in. Just don't. Now, if you buy the OEM head gaskets, they come with torque to yield bolts, which is one of the reasons why the head gaskets are so very expensive. We really like Velcro. They're less money and better. I mean, how often can you say that in one sentence? Less money and better. I mean, take the win, right? And so we really like Velcro head gaskets. But ARP, you've got the conventional head studs. They're fine for 90% of all of us. You've got inner row bolts from ARP as well. Go ahead and it's extra clamping force. Go ahead and do that for sure. Your valve cover gaskets are technically reusable, but do you enjoy leaks? Is that fun for you? No, replace your valve cover gaskets, 100%, right? Intake gaskets, it's like $27 or some such, right? Please change out the intake gaskets. But do you want to, obviously the turbo's coming off, do you want to take apart your turbo, clean it up, clean up the vanes? Maybe. Do you want to just replace the turbo? Maybe. If you're going to rebuild the turbo, we do carry rebuilding kits, but by the time that you go through all the work of doing that, you might just figure out that you're monetarily pretty darn close to just getting a different turbo. So you can talk to us about that. We'll probably shoot another video on turbos. But and then, injectors. Do you want to reuse your existing injectors or do you want new ones? If you want new ones, which ones? Watch my injector video on that. But then there's other conversations in here, right? Do you want to pull the motor? You don't have to pull the motor, but if you do pull the motor, now you have the option to flip the motor upside down and you can change out the bed plate gaskets, because like 1 in 3 of these motors anymore seem to be leaking from the bed plates. It's just a gasket, it's old, right? The gasket's only $20, it's no big deal. So if you pull the motor, you have the option to change that. I mean, you don't want to go through all this work and have an oil leak at the end, do you? So that's the conversation. Now, if you're going to pull the motor, then now the rabbit hole really begins, right? Oil pan's off. Do you want to go ahead and take off your main bearing caps and inspect the bearings? Well, probably, right? Grab some plastic gauge, see what your clearances are. Just do a general inspection. Certainly, you can change out those those bearings. You can change out the bearings without changing out the crank or the cam if that's what you wanted to do. Bearing material is softer, materially softer than the crank or the cam ever was, and so it's designed to wear. And so yes, I mean, you can score yourself a little bit of a win by changing out into different bearings. Do you want to go ahead and pull the crank, pull the cam? Do you want to polish those surfaces? You can elect to do that. It's not actually that complicated, and just get rid of any kind of marring, wearing, whatever. But plastic gauge is your friend, and you can go ahead and verify what you got. Now, do you want to put, if you're going to go through this much effort, do you want to put like a stage 2 cam in there as long as you're in there? It's basically an opportunity to get an organic 45 horsepower, a non-tuned 45 horsepower out of your build. Well, that's pretty handy. So pulling hills and everything else, who wouldn't want another 45 horsepower? So you can elect to do that. As you think about, though, these power gains that you might elect to do as part of this, think also about, is your transmission up to the task? Watch my transmission video. At least do the solenoids that video mentions to give you some extra holding power. That way you can push that ball downfield in transmission land. But do you want to put a stage 2 cam in? I don't know. And whose stage 2 cam do you want to put in? We really like Kill Devil diesels, but there's others, right? And we can talk about the differences. We'll probably shoot a whole different video on camshafts too. And if you've got other ideas for the videos that we do, please put in the comments below. And if you haven't liked and subscribed, why haven't you liked and subscribed yet? I mean, right? We do this for you guys, and we need to know that you're getting some benefit out of it. We don't talk to hear ourselves talk, then, if you're approaching 150,000 miles in your motor, and you probably are, think about whether or not you want to do lifters. It's a very common issue. Oh, I dropped a lifter. Well, you find needle bearings in your LPOP gears, your low pressure oil pump gears. It's just not a good day. And so do you want to change out the lifters? Yeah, probably. Do you want the OEM lifters, or do you want the far better design with the Johnson Premium lifters? The Johnson Premium lifters that we also carry, they have the bigger. Yes, they're machined better, but the number one claim to fame difference is that the oiling hole is bigger, and so they don't starve that roller for lubrication. And so that's kind of fancy. Just recognize that if you choose that lifter, you need to use a custom length push rod. We can make sure that we help you navigate these waters appropriately. But even with conventional lifters, you absolutely want to go ahead and at least spend the sub $100 on a set of 6.4 push rods, because they're 1 millimeter shorter. 1 millimeter is 39 thousandths. That's forever. You think about getting your heads flattened. If you choose to machine your heads, you're going to take off 3, 4, 5, 6 thousandths off your heads, and you're just making just getting it closer. And this, by the way, is one of the reasons why the lifters fail on these, is because they're just pushed so hard. And so by putting a 39 thousandths less distance in that push rod, it makes the lifter's life a little bit easier. And so that's that's a win there. So totally, please go ahead and do that. Now, depending on how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? Do you want to go ahead and take off the front cover of your LPOP and just look for wear on that little wear plate? It's a very inexpensive part actually to just change up that small piece. And so if you want to do that, you could do that. Get a sense for, hey, is my low pressure oil situation where it should be? Is that good? If you're going to be pushing crazy horsepower, maybe you want to invest, and it is an investment. Holy buckets, it's funny. But a billet LPOP gear, you do not want to crack that gear. It'll be a bad day. If you put a billet LPOP gear on there, do you also want to think about recognizing your dampener? It's not new. It's not even close to new. We really like the dampener from ATI. It's the only one that we found that's SFI approved, so pieces of dampener won't go everywhere. But if you put that dampener in there, it's going to absolutely make your engine just run more smoothly. By the way, if you pull the motor out, you take the heads off. This video is kind of all over the place, so but it's all about the greater concept of what do you do when you're in there, right? Do you say you take the main bearing caps off like we talked about, and you find some wear. What do you want to do with that? or say, for example, the heads come off, what you need to do is you need to really carefully inspect for the crosshatches in the individual cylinders and verify you got crosshatches on all of them. If you don't have crosshatches on all of them, you need to get your block machined. I mean, you'd really benefit from it, right? You don't want to do all this net blow by, right? And so it's fine to have a little bit, but I mean, no, this is just a lot of work. Now, if it turns out that you do have missing crosshatches or you do find excessive wear on your bearings, then comes the question of, do I want to send the block out to a machine shop and have them perform their magic? Maybe. If you do decide to send the short block out, make certain that you just grill the crap out of your machine shop. Are they going to go ahead and blow out the oil galleys and brush them out and clean them out? Are they going to dip the whole motor in an ultrasonic, ideally, and verify that that all the crap is out of that block? Are they going to go ahead? I mean, maybe you want to get the block powder coated, but that requires, again, special block prep. And does this machine shop have the ability to do that? I don't know, do they, right? There's a concept that a lot of machine shops don't utilize called a torque plate. What a torque plate is, and we sell them and we rent them, but you bolt this thing, I mean, it's huge, and we'll have another video on that too, but you bolt this to the short block with your ARP studs, and the purpose of bolting it on there is to preload the short block. Basically, you're pulling. People think, oh, I'm bolting down my heads. You are bolting down your heads, but you're also pulling on that short block. So you're pulling on the short block and you're pulling down on the heads, and so you're squeezing the whole assembly. And that pull force is material. Don't be thinking you're not going to contort your actual cylinders, because you are. Contorting them, 3/1000s, 3.5/1000s. This isn't unheard of. And yet that is the vast majority of the clearances that you're getting. So you're basically turning your cylinder into an oval. You're talking about, scuffing of the cylinders at 9 and 3, 12 and 6, whatever it is, 10 and 2, right? Well, 10 and 2, I guess, but it's 10 and 4, and you understand. Do you want to do that? So what you do, if you need to get bored, you say, hey, look, you make sure you use a torque plate. If they don't, they're like, oh, torque plate. Just make sure you talk to them ahead of time and say, hey, what are you doing in torque plate land? And get them the torque plate, or hopefully they have their own if they do this for a living, and bolt it down. Obviously the pistons are out and all this kind of stuff, where they're going to go ahead and do this bore, and preload the individual cylinders so that you don't, so when it's loaded again, when the heads are on, it goes back to that same round. So you preload it, you bore it out the 10 over. And by the way, I don't care what your pistons are like. If you go ahead, they're beautiful, and you go ahead and you put the torque plate adapter on there, you're going to be boring over 10,000s, minimally 10,000s. So just recognize that going in. So you're buying pistons. It's just a question of what pistons are you buying. And down that path, now it comes a question of saying, hey, what pistons are you buying? Are you buying just the OE pistons? We can hook you up with those. Or do you want to get ones with a thermal coating on them? Do you want to get them that are de-lipped? And why would you do this? Because you don't want to crack a piston. That's what we hear so much about. Oh, I cracked a piston. And it's basically, it gets rid of all of the edges on the top of the piston, the sharp edges that are just places for heat to really take root and cause problems in the top of your piston. And again, it's a conversation about metallurgy. So do you want to get fly cut de-lipped pistons with thermal management coating on there? Maybe, right? If you're pushing crazy horsepower, do you want to get diamond layer coated wrist pins? And that way, again, it's a conversation about longevity. If you're pushing crazy power, north of, say, 700 horsepower, maybe even 800 horsepower, do you want to get forged rods, right? Because if you do, then fine. But the base motor is good for about, the short block's good for essentially 600-ish horsepower without modification. So that's pretty impressive, actually. Out of a 320 horsepower OE rig, yeah, sign me up for that, right? But again, there's no right answers, and there's only money. Connecting rods, that's like $3,000. I mean, holy buckets, just that one thing. And then if it's going to go to the machine shop and they're going to board out the torque plate adapter and everything else, do you want them to align home the whole thing? And that way, all of the bearings are just perfectly where they should be. Yes or no? Ideally. Well, yes, right? And do you want them to balance the rotating assembly, and that way it idles like a Lexus, right? Well, not quite, you understand, right? Just idles smoother because now it's a balanced assembly. Does your machine shop have the ability to do that? Query them. Say, hey, can you do this? Have you done this before? Do you know what you're doing in this regard? Because there's a lot of ways to do it wrong. And so, you just don't want to have problems, right? And are you going to assemble it yourself? Or are they going to assemble it? It's not rocket science. You got to use assembly lube, all the things. You got to use driven oil for it's a high zinc content motor oil, it's a break-in oil. So you want to go ahead and do that, right? When it comes to doing when you actually put the heads back on the short block, ARP will tell you that they want you to do 70, 140, 210 foot-pounds. We would say no, we would start at 35, and then 35, 70, 140, 210, and then come back the next day and retorque them to 210. And we've seen some considerable movement, out of those bolts just by going back the next day. By the way, of course you want to chase the threads of the the short block and where the studs are going to go. Chase the threads with a tap. Make sure it's all beautifully clean. Blow it out of there. All the things. Use the ARP assembly lube, of course. Spin the head bolts, the head studs all the way down. Then just back them out an eighth, and that way you avoid the possibility of cracking your short block, which could end badly. So let's not do that, right? Now, where else do you want to go? Do you want to take the opportunity we talk about using a lapping plate if your block's not going to go to a machine shop, or maybe even if it is, maybe you want to take that lapping plate. Watch my other video on how not to do head gasket jobs twice, and take the lapping plate over their work just so you can get a sense of confidence. If you take your fingernail over that surface, you should feel nothing. Your fingernail can detect 0.002. And so if you feel any kind of anything, no, that's not good. So make sure that you don't do that. And so if you need a lapping plate, you need a sharpening stone or whatever to go over it, we of course can get you that on a rent or sale or whatever it is you want to do. But we just only have to do this again, right? And you can do that same thing on the mating surface of your exhaust manifolds. If you live in a salt belt, we live in Iowa, right? So salty, right? Rusty, crusty. And so maybe you want to take the opportunity to get ported exhaust manifolds. It's an option. Or just put your existing manifolds back on there, but new hardware at least with gaskets, exhaust manifold gaskets. If you take it apart, there were no gaskets. It just means that's the OE build because it didn't come with gaskets. So that's kind of fun. Do you want to go ahead and change out all your sensors? Do you want to put a new cam sensor in, a new crank sensor in, a new exhaust back pressure sensor in? What about on the intake manifold? Do you want to go ahead and put a new oil pressure switch on the top center of the motor to go ahead and it's just one less thing to break later. It's relatively no money. Do you want to update your turbo feed lines and drain tubes? Right? Do you want to change out your up pipes? We really like the up pipes from BD Diesel, stainless and everything else. Do you want to header wrap tape those and then spray them down with silicone coating? Ford's already discontinued the harness on the 03 trucks. So you want these puppies to last as long as you possibly can. Getting rid of heat under the hood is magic, right? So of course you want to do that. Simple things like serpentine belts. Do you want a new serpentine belt? Do you want new upper and lower radiator hoses? Do you want a new thermostat? You really like Mishimoto's 200-degree thermostat, even if you're pulling, absolutely. Do you want to put in a new water pump? You're there, right? You can do a starter later, but the water pump, that's a little bit of effort, right? Obviously there's no putting a cam in later. There's no putting in different bearings later. So how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? Just recognize that there are no right answers, and you can spend a whole lot of money. By the way, do you want to say, forget all this noise, I'm going to just give me a turnkey motor? There's a commercial there. It's not that much money. You're going to start at about $6,000 by the time that you do everything necessary, actually with the gasket kits and everything else. And so it's like, that's not just the end of the world as we know it, right? Are you going to put bigger injectors in or different injectors in as part of this? I don't know. Are you? Right? What about a regulated return? You know that the fuel comes into the front of the head, and the back cylinders are, those injectors are drinking whatever's left over. So if you common rail fuel, okay, heck of a lot easier to do it now, right? So does that have merit to you? If you've got, you know, more than 150, 170,000 miles on your rig, do you want to take the opportunity to replace the fuel pump? You know, a little over $500 buys a replacement OE fuel pump, or you can buy a fast system, which is ridiculously superior, like a fast 140 with a corresponding sump. Absolutely, but these are all considerations. Do you want to take the opportunity to go to a ported intake manifold, because diesels like to breathe, right? So do you want to do that while you're in there? If it's an early build truck, say it's an 03 early build 04, do you want to change out the high pressure oil pump? Yeah, probably. Do you want to, on a later build truck, minimally change out the snap to connect fitting? I wouldn't bother personally. I wouldn't change out the high pressure oil pump. They hardly ever fail, right? So sometimes you say, oh, it's the pump, and you find out, no, no, it's something else, right? But minimally change out the snap to connect fitting if your VIN has that. If you want us to do a VIN lookup for you, we certainly can. But the snap to connect fitting likes to unsnap to unconnect, and if that thing unsnaps violently, the back of the motor, you'll actually crack the back cover. Well, then you're pulling the motor again to fix that. Well, that's not good, right? And so do you want to do something in that regard? I don't know, do you? You know, hopefully this thing didn't just fail catastrophically. You were running some kind of monitoring to get a nice sense for between your coolant temps and your oil temps. And so hopefully you have that. And if you were within, you know, 3, 4, 5 degrees driving down the road, not pulling nothing on the freeway, you know, save your money. But if not, maybe you do want to put in an oil cooler as part of this. And there's nothing wrong with the OEM oil cooler. Just put a coolant filter to go with it, right? And even if it's just a bypass, it's a heck of a lot better than nothing. But we really like the IPR full flow coolant filter. It's got a manifolding system on there. You can do a backflush functionality with it, so you can do that. Or if you want to not do the full flow coolant filter and you want to put a backflush valve on there, the fixture 6 backflush valve, that's an option as well. Every product we're talking about, by the way, it's for sale on our site, and we can help navigate the waters. And we've got existing packages. We've got a kind of a good, better, best kind of packages for, hey, I'm doing head gaskets, now what, right? Or I'm doing performance goodies, and now now what, right? You know, if you choose to lift the cab, do you want to change out the cab mounts? Yeah, probably. They're almost certainly rotted. We really like S&Bs, right? They're silicon. They're not going to degrade. They're not going to fall apart like the OE one did. It's just not going to happen. You won't have a problem, right? I think we mentioned the turbo feed and drain lines already, so you've got that. What about the radiator? Do you want to do anything in the radiator land? Do you want to do anything in intercooler land? I don't know. Do you? Right? It's not that there's a right answer, but you know, probably it does make sense to minimally change out the CAC boots, right? It's not that much money. And there's prefabricated kits. And if you still have the plastic hose, that is a recipe for disaster. It's going to blow. Let's go ahead and change that out, and let's get you a metal pipe up in there, and it's just one less thing to it's one less thing to worry about. But are you going to need rocker box gaskets? Absolutely, you will, right? Do you want you know, if it's an early build, you're going to do the high pressure oil pump. Do you want to change out the J tube? You know, maybe. Do you have monitoring? And so now it's like, well, okay, yeah, I'm spending all this money. I should probably get some monitoring. We really like Edge products as monitors in this regard. They're phenomenal. And it just gives you an idea of exactly what's going on. And so you do all this stuff, and you can feel very, very, very confident about your build. Say, what did I do at the end of this? And people, you know, some people talk to us and they say, hey, I'm going to put a stage 3 cam in there. Please don't. It doesn't make its power until way too high in the RPM curve. It's just not streetable anymore, and you're just not going to be happy. So stage 2 cam is great, right? And you know, you can pull a turbo in about 10 minutes, but you can't put it on in 10 minutes, right? And so it just takes a while. So, you know, how many times do you want to do this job? That's the question of the hour. While that's all apart, do you want to go ahead and change out your exhaust? Again, diesels, they like to breathe, right? What about your motor mounts? Do you want to change those out, right? What about when the motor's out or the cab is up? Do you want to send your frame off and get it blasted? Maybe contact a local blasting company and say, hey, how much is it to soda blast my frame or to sandblast my frame and repaint it and start over? It's actually not that bad. And if you do something like soda blasting as an example, you don't have to remove everything in his brother. So that's kind of nice. I will tell you, depending on what material you choose to do that, it might flash rust literally overnight. So a lot of guys have gotten to the point where they'll go ahead and they'll have their frame blasted, and they'll have the same people who blast it go ahead and throw a coat of primer on there. It's just not that complicated. It's not that big of a deal. Now is absolutely the time for some of this stuff, right? But all your rubber components, all of your heater hoses, all that kind of stuff, absolutely that makes sense, right? Do I personally think it makes sense to do anything with a new AC compressor or a power steering pump or a steering rack? No, I don't. Now, if your steering rack is really loose, yes, by all means, yeah, it's certainly easier. But generally speaking, these are things that can be done later, right? Things that can't be done later, well, you know, things like camshafts and stuff. So there's only one opportunity to do that. That's when it's apart, you know, on the lift or on the engine stand. Now, as far as the engine stand goes, recognize this is a heavy block. If you don't have a ready for prime time engine stand, you're not going to be able to do this. And so there's some tool investment going on as well. But there's nothing that we're talking about here that is crazily complicated. It's all just a means to an end, right? And as long as you know that going in, it's just a lot easier for you. And you can change out accessories like alternators and stuff like that later. It's perfectly, you certainly, absolutely can. One thing we're seeing more of, by the way, is in the central junction box, the fuel pump relay likes to die. So guys will, when their heads are off anyway, they'll send us their central junction box. We'll rebuild their fuel pump, their central junction box by going ahead and replacing that relay because somebody thought it was a good idea to solder this thing in. Oh my gosh! And you got to take the thing wholly. I mean, it's a lot of pieces to come off to get that to happen. But just because you need head gaskets, please don't think you have to pull the cab. You just don't. Please don't think you have to pull the motor. You just don't. Please don't think that you have to have a special lift. There's a lot of YouTube videos of guys that have done their own little home-baked whatevers, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Again, no right answers on any of this. Don't believe the hype. There is not a right answer to any of this. How far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? I don't know. I'm a big fan of bypass oil filtration as an example. Factory oil filtration is 20 microns. The bypass filter we like so much, it progressively filters down to a little less than 1 micron from Insane Diesel. Now, Amsoil's got one that's a straight 2 microns worth of filtration, is decidedly less money. It also filters at 2 microns, not a little less than 1 micron. So it's 50% worse, you could argue. Or is that twice as, I don't even know. You understand. But both of them are ridiculously better than anything that you had before. And so that's the consideration, right? And don't be thinking that, oh yeah, I did all this for the block, I don't have any floaties in there, I don't need a coolant filter, I'm above that now. No, it's crazy common to do this job, put everything back together again, you put your coolant filter in, and then a couple thousand miles later, you go to look and your coolant filter is all kind of goobered, right? You just got all kinds of casting sand and everything else up in there, so you're just not going to get it all out. And so just recognize that as well, all right? But I hope what you figured out is that there isn't a right answer. We do sell short block assemblies, we do sell long block assemblies, we do sell kits that allow you to put it together yourself if that's what you want to do. Obviously, quite a bit more risk for you if you do it that way. But if you're schooled in this already, or if you're up for a challenge, there's nothing rocket science oriented about it. There's so much content on the web that can help you through this. And tech support from us is always free as well. I would just tell you to A, don't be in a hurry. B, if there's a bolt that comes out of a hole, chase the threads. Get a tap in there, chase it, pull it out of there, clean them up. I think you'll be blown away by how much garbage you're going to find in your thread holes. And so you go ahead and you chase all those threads, and by doing so, now your torque specifications for everything else are right. And there is no, you're taking your torque wrench and the noise, and click, click, don't let the wrench make that noise. Don't do it yourself, right? You're not better than the torque wrench. I don't care how long you've been wrenching. You're not as good as the torque wrench. You're close, but you're not as good as the torque wrench. Let the tool do the job. There's torque specs for everything. So find those torque specs, honor those torque specs, and go. Now, with the oil rail coming off, and so I got another video on this on my channel as well, HHC diesel, we also wrote for them. But we wrote for, again, nearly everybody. They make injector cup nipples and their corresponding O-rings. Watch my video on that. It could save you from putting a window in your block. Oh my God, you don't want to do this twice. You don't want to do all this work and put a window in your block later. You don't want to have a hot no start problem. I was talking to a customer just the other day that they didn't have the specialty socket from HHC to verify that their nipple cups were at 90 degrees to the oil rail, and they put everything back together again, and they couldn't develop high pressure oil. Well, what happened? What happened was that they put the oil rail on, and the edge of that injector cup nipple is chamfered, so it's sharp, and it actually cut into that. Oh, it took a piece of the O-ring out. And another customer like a month ago that several thousand miles prior, they had a shop do the work, and now they're sitting on the side of the road and they can't get their truck to restart. And it turned out that the top O-ring on the injector had failed. And so that, that's it. Why? Well, it's because they didn't pre-lube the surfaces. So you got to pre-lube the outside of that thing, and they didn't have this little specialty socket that makes it so the oil rail is so those injector cup nipples are 90 degrees to the rail. And think about the other things, right? You got torque specifications for like standpipes. Well, doesn't it make sense to torque the oil rail down first and then go back and now get the spec right for the standpipes? Of course it does. Let's make sure that that's fully seated before we go ahead and do anything else. All these details, they so significantly matter. And so, and there just aren't right answers. Do you need chromoly push rods? Probably not. Do most of them flow more oil though? Yes. Right? And so, but does the price go up? It's like $265 instead of sub $100. Yeah, but they're stronger and they flow more oil. Okay, isn't that a good thing, right? And there are some other things. If I'm missing anything and you got a favorite thing, well, hey, what about this? What about that? Leave that in the comments below. We can talk about it. If you've got an early build 03. And I don't recall this, but we're so much growing this video. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. But if you haven't changed out the J-tube, think about changing out the J-tube off of the high pressure oil pump. You don't want to have to do this again, right? And if you do the oil cooler that comes out, recognize that that valley has to be clean, not kind of clean, not mostly clean, clean. And so what do? You can't just take rags and wipe it all down. A piece of lint at 4,200 PSI, it becomes a missile, right? You'll blow a hole right through your IPR screen. So let's not do that. Clean it all out, use rags, fine, whatever. But then go ahead and grab your Mighty Vac or whatever, and take some brake clean and you clean that surface down, and then you Mighty Vac it out of there. Don't be using shop towels to clean out the inside. And if you choose to reuse things, money's not unlimited, not for any of us, right? So but you can do things that are free or close to free to help you. Do you need a new IPR valve? Well, not unless yours is shot, but a lot of them, they're just dirty, right? You can pop that screen off there and pop it back on there again if you're careful enough. Just do it, you know, if you got the Ipr valve and sitting there, just, you know, pop it off with a, you know, with a flat-headed screwdriver, or even the edge of a knife, something, the screen will just pop off. You can pop it back on there. And you can take a little 1/4 inch diameter, you know, maybe 1 inch long stove bolt, stick it on your workbench, and you can actually cause that Ipr valve to actuate. You can spray some brake clean on the side of the thing, clean it up, put it all back together. You don't necessarily need new everything, is what I'm trying to relay to you. But you know, certainly there's value in starting over on some of this stuff. People don't realize, like, an exhaust back pressure sensor can leave you on the side of the road. Yeah, replace it. It's not that much money. ICP sensors, replace it. It's not that much money. Now, if you have a late build truck, ICP sensors on the passenger side valve cover, you can always do that later. But you're in there, and do you want to get just in there and done and move on? Maybe, right? And so these are at least some of the considerations. I am very, very, very sure that there's others, but this is a good running start. And you can use this as a basis to compare our various packages to say, hey, what are the differences? Or if you want to do an a la carte version or whatever, you know, certainly you can mix and match and whatever else. But, you know, people use this term, they, oh, I bulletproof my motor. What does that even mean? You know, some folks it means that they have an EGR delete. Other folks it means that they studded the truck. And if they studded the truck, you know, did they do one bolt at a time? I'm so not a fan of that. I know that it's worked for some, and you know that's wonderful. But I'm just like, right? As far as whether that's a good idea or not. So your mileage may vary, but you want to do this one time. You don't want to have to do it over and over and over again. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So use your braking oil, use your assembly lube, all this kind of stuff. And you can also elect to say, no, I'm just going to take off the head, stop right there. The motor's not coming out, sure isn't. The cab's not going up, sure isn't. I'll take this lapping plate and the stone, and I'll go ahead and I'll clean up the short block surface and call it a day. And you know what? That's fine. Right? I have no problems, right? So what level of reliability do you seek? And recognize that when you get in there, you might find more than you bargained for. And so now just keep that in the back of your mind too. How much is this really going to cost me? But at the end of the day, you're going to have a ready for prime time motor that'll go for, you know, another umpteen hundreds of thousands of miles. And so, you know, is it worth it? I don't know. Is it? Right? So I hope this video helps somebody. We are truly all in this together. Never a goal to sell you stuff, just a goal to tell you stuff. We carry a little over 16 million products for this driveline. I mean, it's a lot. So whatever you need, we got you. And I own 6 of these trucks personally. In case it's not intrinsically obvious, there are things wrong with me. But I do love this driveline, and it's a lot, but you know, to do this, it's a lot of money to do this, but it's cheaper than a truck payment every single solitary month, right? And so that's the reason to do it, just to say, hey, I started over, I got a brand new everything, and I don't have to worry about anything anymore. And now I'm just set, and I'm fresh, and I'm good, and then you can move on. But so, you know, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? But good luck to you. We're rooting for you. Whatever you need, we got you. And yeah, we're all in this together. Thanks very much.